So, welcome to the Data Friday. My name is Michael Schimke. I'm the CEO of Scalefree. We run this show here every Friday, 11 o'clock Central European Standard Time, to allow you, the audience, to ask questions about data vaults, data-driven solutions, cloud computing, MVP systems, and so on. Everything data relevant is good. You can ask a question live if you want. You can use the chat here. You can use the Q&A function in the client. Just raise your hand if you want to get voice. Don't misuse it, right? And I also show you a form afterwards where you can type in your question, upload some pictures if you want, of a team, whiteboard, everything works. Yeah, if you receive multiple questions, I would cherry pick. Today, my voice is a bit bad because I'm getting a bit sick, I'm not sure. But yeah, I hope the recording will be good. If we receive multiple questions, I would cherry pick. If there will be no questions at all, I would talk about the MVP cluster here. This is our personal basement for the new ones here joining us today. It's my personal basement. I got in trouble already because of the MVP cluster when it arrived at home. So it's all good. All right. We received a question from the audience. Let me share my screen here. There you go. All right. This is regarding essentially the choice that you have in Data 2.0 regarding the use of business keys, hash keys, or sequence numbers as the primary key in the data vault model. And yes, you have actually 3 options. And this specifically here goes for the loading cycle, so the loading procedures into the raw data vault. That's my assumption here. Now, we can talk about that. We can even extend this question a bit. You all know that in Data 2.0, the biggest or the most obvious, let's say that, the most obvious change to Data 1.0 was the use of hash keys instead of using sequences in the primary key. A lot of questions when this was introduced, we received a lot of questions essentially regarding the hash keys and why should we not or could we not use the business key instead? Because we're deriving the hash key from the business key, so why would we not just use the business key in the data vault model as the primary key? And let me start with that. So hash key is the default, but what about the business key? The business key, essentially, the idea, when you just look at the hub, you're right. Especially if you have, let's say, a very short business key or a fixed length business key, the business key in the hub would actually win over the hash value, the hash key. Because think about this. Let's say you have a text identification number, maybe 10 characters long, or social security numbers, 12, I think, something like that, fixed length. That's great because a fixed length attribute will not be offloaded into a secondary page or shadow page in a database. So it would be efficient as well. And it's shorter than the character 32 that we typically recommend for a MD5. Well, you could store the hash value as a binary 16 as well. But that's the smallest data type you could get away with a hash value. So now you're comparing 16 bytes or 32 characters, 32 bytes versus a string length of 10 or 12 characters. The business key will win on the hub, period. I mean, will win means index size wise and so on. Well, especially index size wise, because the problem is the question is always a bit short-sighted. It's not a hub. I mean, yeah, there's more than a hub in a data vault model. What about the links? Think about this. In most clients, the biggest table by far will be a link table. Because when you deal with IoT data or bank transactions, booking transaction, and so on, or retail transactions, core records, these records will be stored in a non-historized link or dependent chart link. And that's where you have a combination of business keys to identify the transaction. The alternate key, what you have when you have hash keys, there would be an alternate key on a link table where you have the hash key references to the hub references. And now that's all business keys, right? So the business keys that identify your transaction or message or fact, the combination of those business keys quickly get beyond those 16 or 32 characters. I mean, just if you have 2 or 3, 4 business keys in combination, it's easy to achieve, right? And that's your primary key now, a multi-part primary key, multiple columns, and the size exceeding already the hash key. But that's not the biggest problem. It's a big problem already because it's a large table. But what about when you have a satellite attached to this non-hysteresis link? Even a non-hysterized satellite, but what even a data-driven satellite, a standard satellite? In this case, the primary key from the parent will be replicated into every delta in the satellite. And that's the biggest problem. Now it gets even bigger. That's a storage problem so far, an indexing problem, because you will have primary keys with implicit indexes on it. You will reference those with foreign keys from the satellite and so on. But the bigger problem is that when you start querying it, when you just query the hub, everything is faster than with the queries with a data vault model based on business keys will be faster than a data vault model based on hash keys. Problem is, it's a very untypical, let's say, a very uncommon query pattern to query just a bunch of business keys from the data model, right? So you want to build dimensions, for example, of fact entities. In this case, you're going to select data from a hub and its satellites, or the non-hysteresis link and its satellites and hubs and so on. So you're going to combine. And what you see is when you use business keys, that you will have essentially, depending on what you query, the hub will be faster than hash keys. But then when you start querying the link, your performance will drop down. And if you go for the satellite, your performance will even drop further down. And what you see is the more you dig into your model, the worse gets the performance essentially. And that's the issue. That's the biggest issue. So the hash key will provide us a consistent query performance no matter what we're querying, because it's always a character 32 or binary 16 or character 40 or something, depending on what you're using, MD5 versus H1. And that's guaranteed always to have the same size, and it's fixed length, because you might get away with the text identification number on the hub, but I don't believe that all your business keys are fixed lengths. And sooner or later, your business keys will be offloaded by a data, or might be offloaded by a database into shadow pages. And that's when your join performance will also drop down, because now you have to get multiple pages into memory for performing joins. Longer story. Yeah. Just check out what a shadow page is and how it offloads the data into of variable lengths into shadow pages, and then you realize what it means for a join, because you have to join all these pages later on. So that's the problem. Well, on MVP databases like Teradata and other databases like Exadata, Snowflake, and so on, we see that either it's fully documented that for example, Teradata hashes primary keys, foreign keys, and primary index transparently in the background, which means that we don't have to hash the business keys. Teradata will do this for us. And we see the same, I mean, as a result, you have no performance impact. So no matter what you query, the performance will have the same performance essentially. And we see the same effect on Snowflake as well. So we could use business keys on these typical MVP databases. However, if you intend to build a data warehouse across multiple environments, some data or some part of the solution is on Snowflake, some part of the solution is on an Oracle database, and so on. In this case, we would stick to hash keys, because then you have one pattern that fits all, right? So one pattern that works just everywhere. That's nice. We would only use business keys if your whole solution is on these on an MVP database, and you don't intend to add additional environments later on. I mean, where this pattern is not supported. There's a trend though, and the long-term trend, in 30 years from now, we're not going to use hash keys anymore. We all use business keys, because the thing is this: the data volume will increase. And you can't use the data volume in 30 years from now on a single node system anymore. Even the small cases won't work. So that's why in most MVP databases, I don't want to say too much here, right? But many MVP databases follow this pattern from Teradata essentially. All right, so that's regarding business keys and hash keys. I always say in training, with today's technology, today's environments, by default, I would go for hash keys, except when everything runs on an MVP database and I don't have any intention in the future to add something else, right? What about sequences? We have customers where they use sequences, but those are the migration projects. We have them as customers because they want to get rid of the sequences, to be honest. So these are the typical Data Vault 1.0 to Data Vault 2.0 models. migration projects where they want to get rid of sequences because they have some issues. And let's come back to this question here. So nobody wants these sequences anymore because of the loading cycle problem, which comes next. So what's the benefit of using either hash keys or business keys over sequences? And it's true. From a loading perspective, you can use hash keys and business keys, but remember, business keys might be a problem on a traditional database. And but what about the sequences? The problem is with the sequences that when you load a data model, let me just draw this up a bit. The problem is, let's say you have a customer walking into store purchasing products. There's a hub customer involved somehow, a hub store, hub product. And there's a link involved, a non-historized link for the transaction. And then a non-historized satellite for a transaction. That's the rough data model. Now the problem is if everything is based on sequences and you want to load this satellite down here, you have to find out the sequence of the parent. The parent sequence, however, is not in the is generated by the non-historized link, and that sequence you only a non-historized link is not a good example. Let's say we got a relationship. It's a live session, right? So let's remove the customer here, and we just have the relationship which stores exist in which products exist in which stores. So this becomes a standard link and a standard satellite. Done. Problem solved. This is some explanation, whatever. All right. So the problem now is you want to load the satellite. The sequence for the satellite would come from the parent. That's the primary key of the parent. To generate or to receive the sequence, you need to have the sequences of the referred hubs, because the link is just a combination of sequence values, right, to the hubs where you store the business keys. Now in your staging area, you only have the business keys for the store and for the product. So in order to find out the sequence for the link, the first thing you have to do is you have to check for the sequence in the hubs for your business keys. With those two sequences, one sequence for the store, one sequence for the product, you perform a lookup into the link table to get the sequence for the combination, for the relationship. And with that sequence, you can then join into the target satellite to receive the latest delta, if exists, for this link sequence. And then you can essentially do the delta check to find out that most deltas, most records in staging are unmodified. So you perform a lot of lookups into all these tables just to find out there is no delta in the staging area regarding this target satellite. Because typically in most scenarios, most records don't change that much, right? So assuming full loads, let's say. Now, if you have hash keys or business keys, you have the business key in staging. The satellite is either a business key in a primary key plus the load date, or the hash key of the business keys from the parent and the load date. So what you do is you either just use the business key from staging area to perform lookup against the satellite only to receive the latest delta for this business key, and then do the delta check, or you hash the business key once, check against the target satellite to get the latest delta for the hash key, and then again perform the delta check. So I don't have to look up against the parent tables, the link or the hub entities when loading the satellite. And that has a big impact in multiple, for multiple reasons. One is in batch loading, much less I/O performance that you consume. Yes, more CPU performance, but it's easier to scale up and cheaper actually. Think about this. If you want to scale up CPU performance, well, then just add more cores, more CPUs, and so on, right? Or scale up the worker roles and so on for the hashing, essentially. If you want to scale up the I/O resources, well, the first thing you want to do is you introduce RAID 5 or something, but that only brings you to so far. And then sooner or later, you have to horizontally split your data sets, which means that you start replicating RAID 5 arrays from one system to the next, essentially, to have parallel lookups on independent disks. So it gets a mess. That's for batch loading. But even for real-time loading, think about when you receive a message and you break it apart into hubs and satellites, and you just want to load the satellite, you have to load all the entities in the right order. Hubs first, links first, satellites first. Oh, sorry, hubs first, links next, satellites last, roughly. Let's see, rough order. And now you have to do this in real time. Same, by the way, for batch, right? But in real time, it becomes also a problem because now you're essentially delaying the real-time flow of the incoming messages. So those are the issues why we don't use sequences anymore. Our customers also don't want to use them anymore. They want to get rid of them. And the hash keys, but I'm now leaving the loading cycle limitation of this question here. The hash keys allow you to have distributed enterprise database systems. You could do the same with sequences, but it's a pain with sequences. With hash keys, you can load every environment in the cloud, on premise. You can load all these environments in parallel without dependencies between the environments. And then, in the best case, by the latest in a dashboard system, in a dashboarding tool, you create different connections, one into the cloud, one into premise, and just join on the hash key. That's the most easy solution. I agree. Problem is if you have business rules that need data from different environments, you either split the dimension into multiple dimensions. So those attributes calculated from the cloud, you have in one dimension from the cloud, then you have one dimension from on-premise, and join everything again back in the dashboarding system. Maybe combine the attributes then in the dashboard layer. So have the final, let's say, a combination of combining business rule in the dashboard layer. Not a nice design, but it's actually the most easy one. Or you use some virtualized SQL tool like Apache Drill, for example, where you can join data from different environments. You can join data from any JDBC driver, either from data from Snowflake, from in the cloud, or from some Oracle database on premise, and so on. You just join it in Drill, apply your business logic in SQL on the resulting data set in Drill, just relational stuff, what you know from relational databases, and then consume the Drill results using the JDBC driver for Drill in Tableau, Power BI, and so on. Or you use some other technology like the Nodo, for example, we can also achieve similar. So those are the options once we have hash keys, all that becomes available, and customers do this actually with great success. All right, and that's why, but the same, you have the hash keys, but the same you can achieve with the business keys, right? The hash keys are just derived from business keys, but again, you want to do this only when your whole environment supports business keys, but then it becomes actually an option for you. All right, that's it, I think. Sorry for extending the question here beyond loading cycles. If you have a question like this, use this form here, https:/sfr.ee/dbfriday up here. That form allows you to submit questions and then also upload some pictures or images if you want. There's also more webinars these days. There's a monthly webinar on DBT. We had last time a question on the data vault for DBT package. And essentially we have a monthly session where we talk about essentially DBT related questions, similar to this format here, not exactly the same. And the same to WhereScape questions. So if you have any specific tool questions, check out this URL, scalefree.com/ and then the sharp symbol and webinars. And check out the webinars there as well. Great stuff from our consultants. They know this stuff as well. So on a regular basis. Cool. So enjoy the weekend. Hope to see you next Friday on the Data Vault Friday, but also check out the webinars for the DBT and WhereScape sessions. Thank you guys. See you next time.
Thanks for joining today. If you'd like to discuss this further, give us a call on the number below here, and we're happy to discuss this with you. See you next time. Have a nice weekend. Bye-bye.